Okay, good morning, dear students. Akanksha, Murdula, Bhargavi, Kutika, and Vinita. Okay, good morning to all of you. If I'm audible to you, kindly text me quickly so that I can begin today's lesson. Dear students, please do text to me if I'm audible to you loud and clear. If I'm audible to you loud and clear, please do text me quickly so that I can begin my lesson. Okay, thank you, Prajwal and Akanksha. Thank you so much. So, Niraj, good morning, all of you. So, today we are going to learn a new lesson. We're going to start a new lesson. Okay, okay. So, see, as you can see right onto your screen, it is the portrait of a lady. The name of the lesson is the portrait of a lady. Okay, so here portrait means what? Portrait means basically portrait means a picture, right? A picture, a framed photograph is called a portrait, right? Here in this story, Khushwant Singh, you might have heard about Khushwant Singh is was a in fact he died a couple of years back. Khushwant Singh was a very famous uh, you can say journalist as well as fiction writer. He wrote several books. He was a very famous literary personality from India, Khushwant Singh. So Khushwant Singh, here in the story, you'll find the autobiographical element. Why? Because Khushwant Singh is describing about his own grandmother, right? And he's how his grandmother was very much caring for him in his childhood, how she used to take great care of him in the while going to school, because his parents were away from Kushband even in childhood. So his grandmother took great care of him, right? Even when it came to accompanying him to the school and other places. So we shall come to know about his grandmother, how was she as a personality, her appearance, her characteristics, and her religious bent of mind, and all that Khushwant Singh here in this story describes about. And the very title of the story, the portrait of a lady, the portrait means here you can say he has made a portrait of his grandmother in his mind. From his mind's eyes, he is trying to recollect his grandmother, how she used to look, okay, what kind of sari she used to wear, what kind of activities were she involved into. So all this he is trying to recall in his mind's eyes. That is why metaphorically the word the portrait has been used here. The portrait of a lady. Lady here refers to the grandmother of Kushbant Singh. Right? So, dear students, we shall begin today's lesson, the first lesson of your syllabus, the portrait of a lady. And this lesson belongs to your uh, book called Hornbill. It's the main textbook of your syllabus. There are two books, as I told you yesterday. One is the Hornbill, another is Snapshot. This particular story belongs to Hornbill, right? It's taken from the story Hornbill. Okay, so here you go. Let me begin my story of the portrait of a lady today. Okay, so please do focus on the screen. If you have any doubt, you can ask me, text me. I shall certainly respond to you. Okay. So, dear students, let's begin our lesson. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. I had known her, right? So, my grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. Okay, it means that then means Kushban Singh's grandmother was a very old lady. Um, but in spite of being old, she appeared to be looking almost identical for the last 20 years. That is what Kushban Singh says. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. Okay, so it seems that grandmother has remained the same almost for the last 20 years. She was old, but she was in the same state of appearance. Okay, she was in the same state of looks for the last 20 years. That is what Khushwant Singh is describing about his grandmother. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. Okay, now why does why does then Khushban Singh said this about about his grandmother? People said that she had been once been young and pretty and had even had a husband. So, but then by the time Khushban Singh started seeing his grandmother, she already turned an old woman. That is why he was not able to believe that once she was very beautiful and once she was very young, because since Kushban Singh started seeing seeing his grandmother, she was old and she remains in the same state of appearance for many years. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. Now, his description switched to his grandfather, saying that my grandfather's portrait was hanging above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the vast part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. Okay. Why? Because he was not able to understand that grandmother is wrinkled, grandmother has wrinkles on her face, on her skins. How come my grandmother could have been very beautiful in our youth? So this particular thought of thought in his mind of his grandmother being very young and pretty was something revolting for him. It is difficult for him to believe. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. Okay, so whenever his grandmother used to tell him that we used to play such and such in our childhood, again it was difficult for the writer to believe, for Pushpan Singh to believe. He thought that like my grandma, we are listening to a story which is something like fables, means something which does not exist, something that is just imagination. She had always been. Now he has started describing his grandmother. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Okay, so here he gives the description of her appearance, right? So let's find out. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older. and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the herds beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Okay, so what kind of a description Khushwant Singh is giving about his grandmother? Let's find out. Uh, like by the time, since the time you can say, since the time uh, Khushwant Singh started, was born might be, or was able to find out, or was able to identify persons, he could see his grandmother old. That is why he it is difficult for him to believe that his grandmother once has been very pretty. So that is what he's saying, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older. He's saying she could not have grown older and had stayed the same age for 20 years. She does not seem to become more old. That is what uh, is that is what is apparent, because there are some people you might see, there are some people who, even though are getting older and older, but they do not have that on their appearance. Okay, they do not, that particular age doesn't reflect on their appearance, because it seems that they have the steady looks for many years, right? Grandmother is also of the same type actually. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, and she used to always wear a spotless white sari with one end resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Right. She was very much religious. We come to know about her religious bent of mind from this particular fact of her holding beads of her rosary in one of her hands, right? Her silver locks means her hair, actually her hair became all gray, you can say, silver colored, okay, were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. She was very religious in by nature. So how do you know she was religious? One of her hands were telling the beads of her rosary. Okay, you see here, and another and her lips were constantly busy in chanting prayers. Okay, even though they were inaudible because she was saying very softly, but we can understand that she was very much religious by these two activities of hers. Okay, yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Contentment means happiness or peace. It's called contentment. So as she used to wear white sari, she used to remain neat and clean always. That is why she appeared to be like the winter landscape in the mountains. Okay, because she used to wear white sari, which resembles the white snow of the mountain, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. My grandmother and I were good friends. Now, in this paragraph, Khushbant Singh will discuss about his relationship with his grandmother. His relationship with grandmother, right? He's saying, my grandmother and I were good friends. My parents, and his childhood background is also given to us. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. Grandmother and uh, like Khushwant Singh, they are together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for the school, right? So it was a duty to wake him up in the morning and get him ready for the school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart, right? So deliberately, dear students, deliberately she used to tell tell the prayer, that morning prayer, so that Khushban Singh could hear it and he would learn it by heart. That is why deliberately she used to tell the prayer, okay, loudly to him, right, so that he could pick it up, right? Okay. Next, you see, I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it, right? Him, you know, he listened. He listened because he loved her voice, not with the intention of learning, of course. Right? Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. Okay, so some stale chapatis she used to carry for the village dogs also, because she used to always accompany. She used to take Khushban Singh to the school, right? So that is how Khushban Singh grew up in the company of his grandmother in childhood, right? So in this stanza is important. Sorry, this paragraph is important. Why? Because this paragraph tells you the attachment of Khushban Singh with his mom, how his childhood went, okay, in the company of his grandmother. So that is why this paragraph is important. Then you see, my grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. That was one of the main reasons for his grandmother to accompany him to the school. What is the main reason? Because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time, the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. Right. So, the what grandmother and especially grandmother used to do while the narrator or Kushban Singh was in the school has been described here, right? Next, you see, when my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. Right. So, when Khushban Singh's parents got settled in the city, his parents sent for the grandmother and Khushban Singh. Grandmother and Khushban Singh, both of them together. And that was a turning point in their friendship. And that was a turning point in their friendship. Why that was a which was a turning point in their friendship? Their shifting, their when they shifted to the city in his parents house, that is the time when that is the time which was a turning point in their friendship. Why? Because in the city, the narrator, that is Kushban Singh, was studying in an English medium school, and moreover, like grandmother was not able to accompany him to the city because he used to go by a school bus. Okay, so this is how gradually his attachment with his grandmother was going down and down. Okay, attachment was decreasing. Why? Because of this reason. Because of this particular reason, that in the childhood, in the village, he used to often accompany his grandmother in the school. Now it's a city school, it's a town school. Therefore, he had to go in the school bus, and moreover, he was studying in an English medium school. That is the reason as to why. And moreover, might be he was staying separately in a separate room from grandmother. So that's how their attachment was snapped. Their attachment, the village attachment was snapped actually. Okay, although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus, right? And then there were no dogs in the streets, and instead of feeding dogs, now she is feeding sparrows in the courtyard of their city house, right? As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other, right? As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world behind being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. So, after Khushbant Singh returned from his city school, he used to narrate to his grandmother about what things he learned in the school that day. Okay, and like English words, what kind of English words, how what are the English words he has learned. Then he also shared something about Western science, learning, law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, then why is the world round, okay, geography lesson. Uh, Everything he used to share with his grandmother after he returned from the school. Okay, but this made her unhappy. Why unhappy? Because she could not help me with my lessons, because he started studying in English medium school. That is why she doesn't understand English. That is why she started becoming unhappy. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God. In English medium school, there is no teaching about God and the scripture, and that is why she became even more disappointed with the system of education in the city school. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. Okay, she was very disturbed. To her, music had lewd association. It was the monopoly of hurdlers and beggars, and not meant for gentle folk. It is her bad impression, of course, about music. She did not like it. And her concept was totally wrong because music is not associated with such things. Okay, she said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. Right? She rarely talked to me after that. Okay, she rarely talked to me after that because she did not get interest in, because the narrator was discussing with her about Archimedes' principle, about Western science, about English words, right, about geography lessons, which she was not so much interested, okay, to learn or listen. Why? Because she was totally religious minded. She was unhappy because in the city school there is no teaching about God and scriptures. That is why she became even more unhappy. And then gradually, when she did not find interest in the sharing of lessons, okay, by Kushwant Singh, she started, taking less and less interest, right? And this is how their attachment also started, becoming snapped. Okay, so this is immediately after both of them shifted to the city house. Okay, in their where their parents stayed actually, right? Then you see, when I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. And then he is describing about his university. When he went to university, he was given a room of his own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignations. Seclusion means state of uh, living lonely. Actually, okay, that is called seclusion. Okay, seclusion means if you live lonely, or if you live alone in a place, okay, that is called seclusion, right? So my grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation because she has nothing to do, because she couldn't help it. That is why, with resignation, she had to accept. She rarely left her spinning wheel. And then, how did she spare her time in the city? She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. Okay, so this is the routine of grandmother in the city. Okay, she used to be busy with her spinning wheel. She rarely talked to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she was sitting by the spinning wheel, okay, spinning and reciting prayers at the same time. And then in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirpings. This is veritable bedlam of chirpings is metaphorical literary expression actually. It means they were making so much of different types of noise actually. Okay, because if you take care of the birds, if you take care of all these okay birds and all sparrows, what will happen, like they will they will also recognize our efforts. They also give us love and care in return. Okay, so they used to always come to have their food at a particular time when grandmother was feeding them, right? So whenever a particular time came, they used to come. Okay, they used to come. The sparrows used to come and eat the stuff that grandmother used to give them, because like they understand birds and all. They understand things. Okay, they have sense of time also. So they come and they take it at a particular time. Okay. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round, and after that they also made little mixture of lot of sounds actually. Okay, so that is the meaning of veritable bedlam or chirpings. Some came and parsed. Parsed means sat on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. Okay, she was smiling but never drove them away. It used to be the happiest half an hour. Dear students, that there is a question actually. So this particular paragraph is important. What is the happy half an hour for grandmother? Okay, what was the happy half an hour for the grandmother? This particular moment was the happiest half an hour for the grandmother every day. Okay, so what was this happiest hour, half an hour? Feeding the sparrows. Feeding the sparrows were in the evening was the happiest half an hour for her. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could, right? So when the narrator decided to go abroad for his studies, he thought my grandmother would be very upset because I would be away for 5 years from my grandmother. And at this age, you never know, after 5 years, she might not be alive when I come back. I would be away for 5 years. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. She came to the railway station. Can you see? She came to the railway station to bid him goodbye. Then she gave to leave to see him off to railway station. Her lips moved in prayer. She did not talk to anybody, did not show her emotion, but she was just praying. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of a rosary, because one of her fingers was always busy telling the beads of a rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. Because he thought that after 5 years, my grandmother might be dead. That is why he thought this particular this particular physical contact, okay, was the last physical contact between us. He thought, but it was not so. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. Even after 5 years, she was alive and she came to receive him at the station. She did not look a day older. She remained same in the same state of appearance. She still had no time for words. While she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer with frivolous rebukes. Okay, so this is the constant. This is the this is the regular activity she was indulged into. Okay, that half an hour of time in the evening she used to feed the sparrows, right? And that was the happiest moments for her. So even after 5 years, she was with the same habit, right? So that is what he's saying. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. Okay. So in the evening, something odd happened actually. That evening, when very day when he returned from abroad, she did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood. Right. We'll come to know what happens later on because it is something which I need to explain you. Okay. In the next class, I'll explain you, dear students. So thank you so much for being with me. I shall explain you, right? I shall explain you tomorrow the last part of the thing. She was not praying suddenly in that evening. Some change took over her. We have to find out what kind of change she was undergoing, okay, and what happened to her towards the end. So thank you, dear students, for being with me. Before you leave, kindly text me P so that I can register your presence later on. Okay, please do text me P that is present before you sign out of this channel. Yes, thank you, Vinita, Arya, Ria, Sania, Prajwal. Thank you so much. Yes, please do text me your response. Text me P so that I can take your attendance today. Yes, thank you. We shall meet tomorrow at 9:50. It seems 9:50. We shall meet. We shall wind up this lesson as well as we shall discuss some theme. I mean, discuss once again the critical themes, question answers of this lesson, right? So that is why I kept the last part unfinished so that I can discuss with you tomorrow how the story comes to an end and what is that we have learned from the story. And we shall also discuss about the textual questions and answers tomorrow. Thank you, dear students. Bye bye. Take care. I am signing off now. Bye bye.